So, one of the great mysteries, to me at least, was how to load files in ProDOS assembly. Luckily, there's an Apple II programming group on Facebook named Call -151. Every once in a while, one of the guys named Dan Henderson hosts a Zoom meeting for people to share their work. So I hopped onto one of these meetings, and two guys pointed me in the right direction. Selim Abraham, he recommended a book called Beneath Apple ProDOS. He showed me some important pages in the back of the book, and he kind of talked me through the process. Also, another guy, Mark Golembeck, shared some of his source code that he uses to load files in ProDOS. So I thought I'd share what I learned from the perspective of kind of a newbie, a less experienced assembly language programmer. And I figured maybe it would help somebody else out there, because this is definitely something that I needed to see, because I'm kind of the person that learns through example. Instead of just kind of reading through how to do it, I need to see some examples. So I'm actually going to start from basic and just kind of the way that I used to know how to do this, or kind of the previous ways to do this, and I'll work my way up to assembly and ProDOS. So let's just start with basic. So you can see a prompt here. So normally if you have an AppleSoft prompt and you want to load a picture, a high-res picture, you would start with HDR, and then you would, if my file, let's say my graphics file was named Apple II, I would put that, and then location 2000, that's high-res page 1. So you hit enter, and there it is. So that picture loads there. So then let's say that you had a basic program, whether it be in DOS 3.3 or ProDOS. I don't think it matters. So you would, of course, have to number it, and you would have to do this. And then you would run the program, and you get that there. Alright, so that's basic. Alright, next we're going to look at assembly, but this time we're going to start with DOS 3.3. And I figured out how to do this from actually another group on Facebook called Apple II Game Development. And the guy running that is Michael Packard. And so I asked a question about, loading files, and he posted, it was great. He posted me some source code. He's like, this is exactly how I do it. So I was able to kind of look that over and use that. He only programs in DOS 3.3. On his page, when I brought up ProDOS, it's kind of funny. I brought up ProDOS, how would you do this in ProDOS? And I kind of started a disagreement with people on there, and they kind of started talking about which is better, DOS 3.3 or ProDOS. And they're kind of going through that, so that kind of surprised me. So, if you have questions about DOS 3.3 programming, assembly, that's probably the place to go there. So this is basically how I do it. Start the program, define HDR. So this is, basically HDR, what you would, the subroutine for that, and then this is like a printing subroutine. So here's where the program begins. You would jump to that, and then you would just start a loop here, because you need to read this data down here. So it just does it one byte at a time. So it just jumps to the first byte, which is character return. You need some character returns so it doesn't like run into any other text. And then you've got your control D, which is like in the basic program, that CHR $4 thing. That's that right there, and then this is the text to load it right there. So it goes through that loop, and then this is something that Michael Packard put there, getting it off the stack, just I guess so you don't fill up the stack. And then normally you'd end a program with RTS, return the subroutine and end it. When I did that, I got a syntax error. It would run through the program, but then at the end it would just give me a syntax error. So then one of my books said if you run into that problem, and usually they said if you're using the C out, you're going to run into that problem when you're trying to end a program. So they said instead just jump to this location, 3DO. So, and speaking of 3DO, I'll go a little bit off topic here. I was one of the few people that owned a 3DO game console. I don't know if you remember those. So there's actually an Apple II connection there. So one of my favorite games was called Out of This World. In Europe, I think it was called Another World, but Out of This World was ported to the 3DO and the Apple II GS by the same person, Berger Becky Heinemann. And as a matter of fact, on the 3DO version, there's like a spot to put a code. So if you put the code BRGR at the beginning, it brings you to a secret game called Stalactites, which looks kind of like a breakout game when you first look at it, but it plays differently. So the Apple II GS, believe it or not, had a release of Stalactites also by Berger Becky, and it was a separate game from the Out of This World, but it was freeware. So it's kind of a little connection there. So, all right, enough of that though. We'll move on to the reason we're here. Next, we're going to do assembly source code that works in ProDOS. So, this is different than DOS 3.3. Obviously, you know, the whole reason I needed to figure this out was because disk access runs completely differently when you're doing assembly programming. So we've got, we define HDR again. This time, machine language interface, I think it stands for. This is the disk access thing that you're going to need, and of course HDR. So you begin, and then you just jump to that MLI, and then you've got these call codes, and this is where the back of that Beyond Apple ProDOS book, it defined all these different calls that you have to do. You have to open a file, read it, and close it. Okay, so here's the call that you need, C8. I found that in the back of the book. And then you jump to this open list, 3 perimeters. So in the book, it's, you know, if you do an open, it's always going to be 3 perimeters. So you have to have a 3 there. Then you have your file name, so it's a pointer, and then a buffer. The buffer was something that kind of confused me, but basically it was kind of explained to me that you just need a you know, part of memory where it can do all of its calculations. I think it's like 1 kilobyte or something, and so you just need to point that kind of away from your program there. Then it's going to assign an ID to this file that you're opening, and so then that ID you're going to have to copy it for later use. And then this is actually the file name down here. Remember I said there was a pointer, file name 1, so you got to start with the length. So this is kind of determines the length of it right here, and then this is the actual name, and you have to do the full path name. And so the name of my disk is disk 1, and then you've got Apple II as the name of it. So then you go to read, and then it's going to read. You need to input the address. So if you remember from my AppleSoft example, it's 2000. That's the address it needs to go to, and then the length. So typically these files, these high-res files are 1FF8, and then the computer will just define an actual length. I guess if it's different, I guess you could just put like FFFF if you don't know, and it'll come up with it. So, and then you've got your close list there, which is just 1 perimeter, and it just needs to know the ID there. And then the RTS will work fine to close the program there. So that's how that works. And then I was kind of experimenting. That's kind of a basic, you know, way. And obviously you can, if you've got more pictures or something, you can have a file name 2, a file name 3, and then you can just throw that in there. And so you could just use this routine to open up as many picture files as you want. And so I was kind of experimenting, so I kind of expanded this a little bit. All right, so this is kind of an expanded one that I've kind of experimenting with different things. I've kind of expanded it. So if we look here, there's actually another call set called set prefix. And that means that, you know, if I'm listing files here, I can just put the actual name of the file name, and I could set the path name as /disk1 just once at the beginning, and then I won't have to kind of just fill it up with extra text here. So if you want to set the prefix ahead of time, you can do that here with this call. If there's an error, like let's say the disk is it can't find the file, so file not found. If your result is other than a 0 when you do this, then it'll be error, and then you can jump to error. And right now it prints the error number, it beeps, and it has a little return, and it ends the program. But you could divvy it up here if you know the error number is like write protected. Let's say you're trying to write a file instead of read a file, and you get an error message. You can have a message on the screen that says write protect or something. So it's kind of a good way to trap errors, because I had no idea how to trap errors in DOS 3.3. So this kind of seems like it makes it easier here in ProDOS. The other thing, this end of file call. So I was thinking like let's say I am not opening just picture files, but let's say other files that are of different lengths, and I don't want to type the lengths in here. This used to say 1FF8. So you can use this end of file call, and it'll figure out the length of the file, and you actually have to put 3 bytes here. Not sure why, but you need to have that. And then you can just copy the results of these first 2 bytes into this R count. That's what I did here. So I've got this loading, this storing, and so on and so forth. So that way you don't have to type in a count here. You might just, like I said before, if you got multiple files, you'll just come in here and change this file name, the file name 2, file name 3, point it down here, and have different files. And of course you'll probably have to put like a different address here, but you won't have to worry about the length. So that's just some extra things that I figured out as I was kind of expanding this and figuring this out. So basically that's all I've got. I'll post some of this information in the description. I'm not really an expert with this. I'm sure I've messed some of the jargon up, but hopefully this will help someone who, like me, once again learns by example and likes to see it on the screen and kind of work from that. So, feel free, if you like the video, to like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching.